Innovatech, a cutting-edge technology company and symbol of innovation in the competitive business world, was about to face an unexpected challenge. When Jack Mitchell, a visionary CEO, founded the company, he had no idea of the profound problems that would arise within his own organization. As tensions and conflicts grew within the Boston headquarters, a seemingly ordinary employee named Thomas Garcia watched in silence. But Thomas was no ordinary employee, and his presence was about to change everything. What hidden power did this new team member possess, and how would Jack's struggle to save his company become the catalyst for institutional change? Let's find out. But before we dive into this story, comment where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this story with unexpected twists and moments of justice, don't forget to subscribe. Jack Mitchell ran his hand over his tired face, his eyes fixed on the computer screen projecting alarming figures. The report before him was like a dagger plunged into the heart of everything he had built. Innovatech, his creation, his legacy, was failing in the most fundamental aspect, the well-being of its employees. How is this possible? He muttered to himself, unable to look away from that 15% drop in employee satisfaction at the Boston headquarters. The words favoritism, racism, and toxic culture seemed to glow on the screen, mocking his ideals. Jack rose from his leather chair and approached the large window that dominated the city skyline. From there, he could see the Innovatech building, a glass and steel skyscraper that rose like a beacon of innovation and progress. Or at least, that's what he had dreamed it would be. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said, without taking his eyes off the window. Sarah, his personal assistant, entered with a folder in her hand. "Mr. Mitchell, here are the additional details you requested about the situation in Boston." Jack turned, taking the folder with a gesture of gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah. Could you schedule a video call with the Boston management team for first thing tomorrow?" "Of course, sir," Sarah replied, but she paused before leaving. "Mr. Mitchell, if I may, everyone at headquarters is worried. We know how much Innovatech means to you." Jack gave a tired smile. "Thank you, Sarah. It means a lot to all of us, and that's exactly why I can't stand idly by." When Sarah left, Jack returned to his desk and opened the folder. As he read, his frown deepened. The anonymous complaints, testimonies from marginalized employees, cases of unfair promotions, everything pointed to a systemic problem that went beyond a few problematic individuals. It was then that an idea began to form in his mind. He knew that his presence in Boston could alter everyone's behavior, hiding the true nature of the problem. He needed eyes and ears on the ground, someone who could blend in without raising suspicion. Jack picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Thomas, I need to see you in my office immediately. I have a special mission for you." As he waited, Jack found himself staring at a framed photo on his desk. In it, he saw himself, younger and full of hope, cutting the ribbon at the inauguration of Innovatech's first office. He remembered the words he had spoken that day. "We will build a company where every person, regardless of their background or skin color, can reach their full potential." Now, those words resonated like a broken promise. But Jack Mitchell was not a man who gave up easily. If there was anything he had learned in his rise from a humble neighborhood to becoming CEO, it was that the greatest challenges were also the greatest opportunities for growth. "I'm going to fix this," he promised himself, "whatever it takes." The sound of someone knocking on the door snapped him out of his thoughts. "Come in," he said, preparing for the conversation that would change the course of Innovatech and test everything he believed in. Thomas Garcia entered Jack's office with a determined step, though inside he felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. It wasn't common for the CEO to call him directly for a private meeting. "Have a seat, Thomas," Jack said, gesturing to the chair in front of his desk. "I have a task of utmost importance for you, one that requires the utmost discretion and skill." Thomas settled in, intrigued. "I'm at your disposal, Mr. Mitchell." Jack handed him a folder. "What you're about to see here is classified information. Our Boston headquarters is facing serious problems, allegations of racism, favoritism, a toxic work culture. I need you to go there and find out what's really going on." Thomas's eyes widened as he leafed through the documents. "This is alarming," he said, looking up at Jack. "Exactly," Jack nodded. "And that's why I need you to infiltrate. You'll go as a new employee in the IT department. Your mission is to observe, document, and report directly to me. No one else should know about this. Understood?" Thomas nodded, processing the magnitude of the task. "Understood, sir. But why me?" Jack leaned back in his chair. "Because you've proven to be not only competent, but also principled. I need someone I can fully trust for this mission." Thomas felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I won't let you down, Mr. Mitchell." "I know you won't," Jack smiled. "You'll leave tomorrow. All arrangements have been made. Remember, Thomas, what you discover could change the future of Innovatech." The next day, Thomas found himself on a plane bound for Boston, his mind going over the details of his new identity and mission. As the plane took off, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and apprehension. What would he discover in Boston? And how would that affect the company he so admired? Hours later, Thomas entered through the glass doors of Innovatech's Boston headquarters. The building was impressive, but there was something in the atmosphere that made him feel uncomfortable immediately. The smiles seemed forced. Conversations died down when someone approached. You must be the new guy." A voice pulled him from his thoughts. A middle-aged woman in an impeccable suit approached, extending her hand. "I'm Laura Hoffman, Senior Operations Manager. Welcome aboard." Thomas shook her hand, noting the firmness of her grip. "Thomas Garcia, pleasure to be here." Laura guided him through the office, introducing him to several employees. Thomas carefully observed each interaction, noting how some employees, especially minorities, seemed to shrink when Laura approached. "And here's your desk," Laura said, pointing to a cubicle. "I expect great things from you, Thomas. Don't disappoint us." As Laura walked away, Thomas sat down and turned on his computer. While waiting for it to start up, he glanced around. In the cubicle next door, an African-American woman was typing furiously, a look of frustration on her face. "Hi," Thomas said, offering a friendly smile. "I'm Thomas, the new guy in IT." The woman looked up, surprised by the greeting. "Anna," she responded dryly, before returning to her work. Thomas frowned. Clearly, there was much more beneath the surface than met the eye. As he opened his email and began to familiarize himself with his supposed tasks, his mind was working at full speed. "This is going to be more complicated than I thought," he muttered to himself, aware that every move, every word, could be crucial to his mission. What Thomas didn't know was that, from an office on the upper floor, someone was already watching him with interest. The real test was about to begin. Days turned into weeks, and Thomas found himself immersing deeper into the complex web of relationships and dynamics at the Boston office. Each day brought new revelations, and each one made his heart sink a little more. One morning, while Thomas was in the break room preparing coffee, he overheard a hushed conversation that caught his attention. "I'm telling you, it's useless, Mark," a woman whispered. "I filed another complaint about Johnson's racist comment, and HR didn't even respond." "I know, Vanessa," a man replied with a tired voice. "But what can we do? If we make too much noise, we could get fired." Thomas pretended to be absorbed in his phone, but his ears were attentive to every word. When the two employees left, he let out a frustrated sigh. It was the third conversation of this kind he had heard this week. That afternoon, during a team meeting, Thomas observed how Laura Hoffman led the session with ruthless efficiency. However, he noticed how she systematically ignored the contributions of certain employees, especially minorities. "Great idea, Jason," Laura said with a smile, despite the suggestion having originally come from Anna, the African-American woman in the cubicle next to Thomas's. Anna clenched her fists under the table but said nothing. Thomas felt a pang of indignation in his chest. After the meeting, Thomas approached Anna. "Hey, that idea of yours about optimizing the workflow was brilliant." Anna looked at him with surprise, then suspicion. "Thanks," she finally said, "though it seems I'm the only one who thinks so." "You shouldn't give up," Thomas said, carefully choosing his words. "Your ideas deserve to be heard." Anna gave a sad smile. You're new here, aren't you? You'll learn how things work soon enough. That night, in the safety of his temporary apartment, Thomas drafted a detailed report for Jack. As he wrote about ignored complaints, blatant favoritism, and the atmosphere of fear, he felt a mixture of anger and determination growing inside him. However, the next day, an unexpected twist shook his investigation. Upon arriving at his desk, he found an anonymous envelope. Inside were copies of emails suggesting that local senior management was actively covering up discrimination complaints. Thomas's heart was racing as he read the documents. This was big, much bigger than he had imagined. But who had sent him this information, and why? As he contemplated his next steps, Laura suddenly appeared behind him. "Thomas, I need you to come to my office. Now." Laura's tone left no room for argument. Thomas quickly tucked the documents into his briefcase and followed her, aware that he was walking on a tightrope. In Laura's office, Thomas found himself facing a screen displaying productivity graphs. "Explain to me why your numbers are below average," Laura demanded. Thomas swallowed hard, aware that his cover could be in danger. "I've been adapting to the new system," he began. But Laura cut him off. "I don't want excuses," she snapped. "I want results. If you can't keep up, maybe you're not suitable for this job." As Laura continued her reprimand, Thomas noticed something on her desk, a photo of her with a man he recognized as a member of Innovatech's board. The pieces started to fall into place in his mind. He left Laura's office feeling shaken, but more determined than ever. That night, he sent another report to Jack, this time including the information about the anonymous emails and his suspicions about Laura's connections. "Things are worse than we thought," he wrote. "We need to act soon." What Thomas didn't know was that his actions hadn't gone unnoticed. In the shadows, someone was plotting how to silence him before he could uncover the whole truth. As Thomas delved deeper into his investigation, the atmosphere in the Boston office became increasingly tense. He could feel eyes following him, conversations that stopped abruptly when he approached. But instead of intimidating him, this only reinforced his determination. One afternoon, as he was working at his computer, Anna approached his desk. "Hey, Thomas," she whispered, nervously glancing around. "Can I talk to you for a moment? In private?" Intrigued, Thomas nodded and followed her to an empty conference room. Once inside, Anna closed the door and turned to him with a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. "I've noticed that you're different," she began. "That you actually listen, that you care. I need to know if I can trust you." Thomas felt his heart racing. This could be the breakthrough he needed. "Of course," Thomas looked Anna directly in the eyes. "You can trust me, Anna. What's going on?" Anna took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been gathering evidence," she said quietly. "Emails, recordings of meetings, documents. It all points to a system of discrimination and cover-ups that goes all the way to the top of the hierarchy here in Boston." Thomas felt his pulse quicken. "Was it you who sent me those anonymous emails?" Anna nodded. "Yes, it was me. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's more, much more. And I think they're starting to suspect me." "Why are you telling me this now?" Thomas asked. "Because I need help," Anna replied. "I can't do this alone. And if something happens to me, someone else needs to know the truth." Thomas wrestled internally. Revealing his true identity and mission could compromise the entire investigation, but Anna was risking everything to do the right thing. "Anna," he finally said, "there's something I need to tell you." But before he could continue, the conference room door burst open. Laura Hoffman entered, her eyes blazing with barely contained fury. "Well, well," she said with a cold smile. "What do we have here? A secret meeting between our new employee and our troublesome Anna?" Thomas and Anna instinctively moved apart, but it was too late. Laura looked at them both suspiciously. "Anna, your presence is required in human resources. Immediately," Laura ordered. Then she turned to Thomas. "As for you, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about your future in this company." Anna shot Thomas a panicked look before leaving the room. Thomas was left alone with Laura, aware that he was walking on very thin ice. "Follow me," Laura said, turning on her heel and leaving the room. As he followed Laura down the hallway, "I'm just trying to understand how things work here, so I can do my job as best as possible." Laura leaned forward. "Is that all? Because I have reports that you've been poking around in matters that don't concern you. Confidential company matters." Thomas's heart was pounding, but he kept his cool. "I don't know what you're talking about, Miss Hoffman. I've just been doing my job." Laura stared at him for a moment, then smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Very well, Thomas. If that's all you have to say, then I think it's time we take more drastic measures." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. What did that mean, and what was happening to Anna right now? Meanwhile, at Innovatech's headquarters, Jack Mitchell was receiving an urgent call. His face darkened as he listened. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice tense. "I understand. Do whatever is necessary. I'm on my way." Jack hung up the phone and stared out the window of his office. Things in Boston were spiraling out of control. It was time for him to take direct action. "Sarah," he called to his assistant, "prepare the private jet. I'm leaving for Boston immediately." As Jack prepared to depart, he knew he was about to face the biggest crisis in Innovatech's history. What he didn't know was that the revelations that were about to come would shake the very foundations of everything he had built. The atmosphere in Innovatech's Boston office was electric. Rumors about the meeting between Thomas and Laura had spread like wildfire, and everyone could feel that something big was about to happen. Thomas left Laura's office feeling exhausted but determined. The conversation had been tense, full of veiled accusations and barely disguised threats. Laura had made it clear that she was watching his every move. "You have until the end of the week to prove your worth to this company," Laura had told him with a cold smile. "Otherwise, I'm afraid we'll have to terminate your services." As he walked back to his desk, Thomas noticed that Anna hadn't returned from Human Resources. His concern grew. What had they done to her? Just then, his phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. "Find the blue folder in the basement archive. Everything's there. Be careful." A key. Thomas looked around cautiously. No one seemed to be paying him special attention. He decided to act immediately. "I'm going to the bathroom," he muttered to his cubicle mate and headed towards the elevators. The basement was dark and dusty, filled with shelves of old boxes and folders. Thomas searched frantically, aware that every second that passed increased the risk of being discovered. Finally, in a far corner, he found a worn blue folder. He opened it with trembling hands and began to read. What he saw took his breath away. Documents, printed emails, even photographs. Everything pointed to an elaborate system of discrimination and corruption that extended far beyond the Boston office. Names of high-level executives, even board members, appeared implicated in bribes, cover-ups, and discriminatory practices. And there, in the midst of it all, was the name of a man Thomas immediately recognized, Robert Blackwell, former COO of Innovatech and Jack Mitchell's mentor. "It can't be," Thomas muttered, feeling the ground move beneath his feet. So absorbed was he in his discovery that he didn't hear the approaching footsteps until it was too late. "Well, well," said a familiar voice behind him. "It seems our little spy has found the treasure." Thomas turned to find himself face to face with Laura Hoffman and two security guards. "I think it's time we had a very serious conversation, Thomas," Laura said, her voice dripping with venom. "Or, should I say, Jack Mitchell's special agent." Thomas's heart sank. His cover had been blown. Meanwhile, thousands of feet in the air, Jack Mitchell's private jet was cutting through the night sky towards Boston. Innovatech's CEO looked out the window, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The report he had just received confirmed his worst fears. The situation in Boston was much worse than he had imagined, and the implications extended far beyond a single office. Jack closed his eyes, remembering the words of his mentor, Robert Blackwell, years ago. "Sometimes, Jack, to build something great, you have to be willing to get your hands dirty." At that moment, those words had sounded like wisdom. Now they felt like betrayal. The pilot announced they were beginning their descent. Jack straightened in his seat, preparing himself mentally and emotionally for what was to come. "It's time to clean house," he muttered to himself. Whatever it takes. What Jack didn't know was that, as he approached Boston, powerful forces were already in motion to stop him. The battle for Innovatech's soul was about to begin, and no one would come out unscathed. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when Jack Mitchell's private jet landed at Boston Logan International Airport. With dark circles under his eyes and a wrinkled suit, Innovatech's CEO descended the plane steps with fierce determination in his gaze. Mr. Mitchell, a man in a dark suit, greeted him. "I'm Special Agent Rodriguez. We have a lot to discuss." Jack nodded gravely. "Take me to the office. Now." Meanwhile, in the basement of Innovatech, Thomas found himself in a desperate situation. Laura Hoffman looked at him with a mixture of triumph and contempt. "Did you really think you could fool us?" Laura sneered. "We knew Jack would send someone. We just didn't expect him to be so incompetent." Thomas remained calm, his mind working at full speed. "If you know who I am, then you also know that Jack won't stop until he uncovers the truth." Laura let out a cold laugh. "Oh, Thomas, you're so naive. Do you really think Jack is the hero in this story?" Before Thomas could respond, the basement door burst open. To everyone's surprise, Anna entered, followed by a group of federal agents. "FBI," one of the agents announced. "Everyone freeze," Laura turned pale. "This is a misunderstanding," she began to say, but Anna interrupted her. "There's no misunderstanding, Laura," Anna said, her voice filled with a confidence Thomas had never heard before. "I've been working undercover for the FBI for months. We have everything we need." As the agents handcuffed Laura and the security guards, Thomas looked at Anna in amazement. "You... all this time?" Anna smiled weakly. "I'm sorry for the deception, Thomas, but we needed to keep the operation secret." At that moment, Jack Mitchell entered the basement, flanked by Agent Rodriguez. His face was a mask of shock and pain as he saw the scene before him. "Jack," Thomas said, approaching his boss, "you need to see this." He handed him the blue folder. Jack began to leaf through the documents, his face paling with each page. "No," he muttered. "It can't be." "I'm afraid it's true, Mr. Mitchell," Agent Rodriguez said. "Robert Blackwell has been manipulating Innovatech from the shadows for years, using his influence on the board to undermine your leadership and maintain a system of discrimination and corruption." Jack collapsed into a nearby chair, the weight of betrayal crushing him. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would he do this?" "Power," Anna replied, "and money. A lot of money. Blackwell has been siphoning funds from the company for years, using discrimination and fear as tools to maintain his control." Thomas put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "I'm so sorry. Sir, I know how much Blackwell meant to you." Jack looked up, his eyes shining with a mixture of pain and determination. "This ends now," he said, standing up. "We've worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let corruption destroy everything we've built." He turned to Agent Rodriguez. "You have my full cooperation. We'll do whatever it takes to clean up Innovatech from top to bottom." As the agents began collecting evidence and escorting the detainees out of the building, Jack approached Thomas and Anna. "Thank you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Both of you. Your courage and dedication have saved this company." Anna smiled. "We just did what was right, Mr. Mitchell." "And now," Thomas said, "it's time to rebuild." Jack nodded, his face hardening with determination. "Yes, it's time to rebuild. But this time we'll do it right. No compromises, no shortcuts. Innovatech will be the example of inclusion and justice that I always dreamed it would be." As the sun rose over the horizon, illuminating the Innovatech building, Jack, Thomas, and Anna stood together, united in their determination to forge a new future for the company. What they didn't know was that the battle was just beginning. The roots of corruption ran deep, and uprooting them wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. Innovatech's true test was yet to come, and the world would be watching. The days following the revelations were a whirlwind of activity at Innovatech. News of the arrests and the FBI investigation quickly leaked to the media, unleashing a media storm that threatened to sink the company's reputation. Jack Mitchell found himself in the eye of the hurricane, dealing with scandal-hungry journalists, nervous investors, and frightened employees. Each day brought new revelations, each more damaging than the last. In a conference room at Innovatech's headquarters, Jack sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by his crisis team. Thomas and Anna, now integral parts of this team, were by his side. "The stock has fallen 30% since the investigation went public," reported the CFO, his voice tense. "Investors are demanding answers," Jack nodded gravely. "And they have the right to have them. We're going to be completely transparent about everything that's happened." "Sir," the head of public relations intervened. "Are you sure? That could sink the company's reputation even further." "Maybe," Jack replied, "but it's the right thing to do. And in the long run, it's the only thing that will save us." Thomas leaned forward. "I have an idea. What if we organize a series of town halls in all our offices? Let's show that we're willing to face this head-on." Anna nodded enthusiastically. "We could combine it with listening sessions. Give voice to the employees who have been silenced for so long." Jack smiled for the first time in days. "I like it. Make it happen." As the team dispersed to put the plan into action, Jack was left alone with Thomas and Anna. "There's something else you should know," he said, his voice low and serious. "I've received threats. Someone wants me to stop the investigation." Thomas and Anna exchanged worried glances. "Do you think it's Blackwell?" Thomas asked. Jack shook his head. "I don't know, but whoever it is, they have powerful connections. I need you both to be extremely careful." "They won't scare us," Anna stated with determination. "We're with you till the end," Thomas added. Jack looked at both of them gratefully. "Thank you, I don't know what I'd do without you." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Jack, Thomas, and Anna traveled across the country, facing angry employees, skeptical investors, and hostile media. At each stop, Jack spoke passionately about his vision of a reborn Innovatech, free from corruption and truly inclusive. Slowly, something began to change. Employees, seeing Jack's sincerity and willingness to listen, began to open up. Stories of discrimination and abuse came to light, but also stories of resistance and hope. At one of these meetings, a young engineer stood up, visibly trembling. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice barely audible, "I want you to know that not all of us here were part of the problem. Some of us tried to fight against injustice, even if on a small scale." Jack looked at her with eyes full of emotion. Thank you," he said. "It's people like you who give me hope for Innovatech's future." Meanwhile, Anna and Thomas worked tirelessly behind the scenes, collecting testimonies, identifying problem areas, and designing new policies to address them. One night, as they were working late in Jack's office, Anna turned to Thomas. "Do you think we can really change things?" she asked, her voice tired but hopeful. Thomas looked at her, noticing the dark circles under her eyes and the determination on her face. "Yes," he said with conviction. "Yes, I think we can." What they didn't know was that while they were struggling to rebuild Innovatech from within, dark forces were moving to stop them. In a luxurious office in downtown Boston, Robert Blackwell was meeting with a group of men in suits, their faces hidden in the shadows. "Mitchell is becoming a problem," one of the men said. "We need to take care of him." Blackwell smiled coldly. "Leave it to me. I know his weaknesses better than anyone." As night fell over the city, the battle for Innovatech's soul was far from over, and for Jack, Thomas, and Anna, the biggest challenges were yet to come. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when Jack Mitchell entered his office. He had spent another sleepless night, going over documents and preparing for the battle he knew was coming. He paused in front of the window, watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, he knew Robert Blackwell was planning his next move. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said, without taking his eyes off the window. Thomas entered, holding a cup of coffee. "I thought you might need this, sir," he said, offering the cup. Jack turned, grateful. "Thank you, Thomas. Any news?" Thomas nodded, his expression serious. They've been manipulating the company's stock for years. Thomas approached, his face a mask of concern. What does this mean for us? Jack slumped into his chair, the weight of the revelation crushing him. It means our fight is even bigger than we thought. We're not just facing Blackwell, but an entire network of corruption that extends throughout the corporate structure. What are we going to do? Anna asked, her voice trembling. Jack stood up, a new determination shining in his eyes. We're going to fight, with everything we've got. At that moment, the office phone rang. Jack put it on speaker. Jack, said a familiar voice. It was Robert Blackwell. I think it's time we had a talk. Silence fell over the office. Jack looked at Thomas and Anna, saw the concern in their eyes, but also the determination. All right, Robert, Jack replied, his voice firm. Let's talk. As Jack prepared to face his former mentor, he knew he was about to enter the biggest battle of his life, a battle that would determine not only Innovatech's future, but also his own legacy. What he didn't know was that Blackwell had an ace up his sleeve, a secret from Jack's past that threatened to destroy everything he had fought for. The countdown to the final confrontation had begun. The restaurant was almost empty when Jack entered. At a table in the back, Robert Blackwell was waiting, his face a mask of calm. Jack, Blackwell said, rising to greet his former protégé. I'm glad you came. Jack sat down, his face serious. Let's get this over with, Robert. What do you want? Blackwell smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Always so direct. It's one of the things I admired about you, but it can also be your greatest weakness. I'm not here for games, Jack replied. I know what you've been doing. The stock manipulation, the cover-up of discrimination, everything. And what are you going to do about it? Blackwell asked, leaning forward. Expose everything. Destroy the company we both built. Jack stared at him. If necessary. Yes, Innovatech was founded with a purpose, Robert, to make the world a better, fairer place, not to line the pockets of a few at the expense of many. Blackwell let out a bitter laugh. Ah, Jack. You're still the same idealist as always. The world doesn't work that way. Power, money, that's what moves things. You're wrong, Jack said, his voice full of conviction, and I'm going to prove it. Even if it means sacrificing your own reputation, Blackwell asked, his eyes dangerously bright. Jack felt his heart rate quicken. What are you talking about? Blackwell pulled an envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. Open this when you're alone, and then decide if you really want to go ahead with this. Jack took the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. This changes nothing, Robert. I'm going to do the right thing, no matter the cost. I was hoping you'd say that, Blackwell said, standing up. Good luck, Jack. You're going to need it. As Blackwell left the restaurant, Jack sat staring at the envelope, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Back at the office, Thomas and Anna were waiting anxiously. When Jack entered, they could see the tension on his face. What happened? Thomas asked. Jack told them about the conversation with Blackwell and then pulled out the envelope. I don't know what's in here, he said, but Blackwell thinks it's enough to stop me. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope and pulled out the documents. As he read, his face went from confusion to shock and finally to deep sadness. Mr. Mitchell, Anna said softly. What is it? Jack looked up, his eyes full of pain. It's about my past. Something I did many years ago when I was starting out in the corporate world. Something I'm not proud of. How bad is it? Thomas asked. Bad enough to destroy everything I've worked for, Jack replied, his voice barely a whisper. Silence fell over the office. Finally, Anna spoke. Mr. Mitchell, no matter what it is, you're not the same person you were then. What matters is who you are now and what you're trying to do. Thomas nodded in agreement. She's right. We've come too far to give up now. Jack looked at both of them, feeling a wave of gratitude. Thank you, he said. But this could destroy everything. Not just me, but Innovatech, everything we've built. Then we'll face it, Thomas said firmly. Together. Jack stood up, his determination renewed. You're right. We can't let Blackwell win. It's time for everything to come to light, everything. As the trio began to plan their next move, they knew they were about to enter the final battle for Innovatech's soul, a battle that would determine not only the future of the company, but also the legacy of everyone involved. What they didn't know was that Blackwell was also preparing his final move, and it was one that no one would see coming. The auditorium at Innovatech was packed to capacity. Employees, investors, journalists, all waited with anticipation. On stage, Jack Mitchell prepared to give the most important speech of his life. Backstage, Thomas and Anna were with him, offering silent support. "Are you sure about this?" Thomas asked one last time. Jack nodded, his face a mask of determination. "It's the only way." With a final squeeze on the shoulders of his loyal collaborators, Jack stepped onto the stage. Silence fell over the audience. "Good afternoon, everyone," Jack began, his voice firm despite the nerves he felt. "I'm here today to talk about Innovatech's past, present, and future, but more than that, I'm here to talk about the truth." In the last row of the auditorium, Robert Blackwell watched with a smile of satisfaction. He was sure Jack was going to surrender. "In recent months," Jack continued, "we've uncovered a network of corruption and discrimination that extends throughout our company, a network that I, as CEO, either couldn't see or didn't want to see for far too long." A murmur ran through the audience. "But I'm not here today to point fingers. I'm here to take responsibility." Jack paused, taking a deep breath. "Many years ago, when I was starting my career, I made a mistake that has haunted me for years and now threatens to destroy everything we've built." In the last row, Blackwell's smile widened. "I falsified financial documents to secure a crucial contract for the company I was working for then. At the time, I told myself it was for the greater good, that I was saving jobs. But the truth is, I was wrong," Jack continued, his voice trembling slightly. A collective gasp ran through the auditorium. In the last row, Blackwell's smile began to fade. "That mistake haunted me for years. It drove me to found Innovatech with the promise that it would be different, that it would be better, and in many ways we have been, but in others, we've failed miserably." Jack paused, looking directly at the audience. "Today, I'm here to say that this ends now. No more secrets, no more cover-ups. From this moment on, Innovatech will be an open book." At that moment, the screens behind Jack lit up, showing documents, emails, and charts. "What you're seeing is a complete audit of Innovatech. Every transaction, every decision, every policy, including the documents detailing my own past mistake." Blackwell stood up, his face pale with anger and shock. "But that's not all," Jack continued. "We're also revealing evidence of a corruption network that extends to the highest levels of our company, a network that has perpetuated discrimination, favoritism, and abuse of power." The screens changed, now showing documents implicating Blackwell and several board members. "I know this may destroy the trust many of you have placed in me and in this company, and I accept that. I'm prepared to face the consequences of my actions, both past and present." Jack paused, his voice breaking for the first time. "But I ask you not to lose faith in what Innovatech can be, in what it must be, a force for good, for ethical innovation, for equality and justice in the corporate world." At that moment, Thomas and Anna came up on stage, flanking Jack. "I'm not alone in this fight," Jack said, looking at them gratefully. "There are incredible people in this company who have risked everything to do the right thing, and with their help, with all of your help, we can rebuild Innovatech from the ground up. Stronger, fairer, more transparent." In the last row, Blackwell was heading for the exit, but found himself blocked by FBI agents. "From today," Jack concluded, "I invite each of you to be part of this transformation, to help us build the company we always should have been. It won't be easy, and there will be more difficult revelations to come. But together, we can do it." The silence that followed was deafening, and then, slowly, someone began to applaud. Soon, the applause spread throughout the auditorium, growing in intensity until it became a standing ovation. Jack looked at Thomas and Anna, tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered to them. As FBI agents escorted Blackwell out of the auditorium, Jack knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, full of legal obstacles and corporate challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he felt truly free. Outside the auditorium, journalists were pouncing on their phones, eager to be the first to report the news. Innovatech's stock was fluctuating wildly in global markets, and in offices around the world, Innovatech employees watched the live broadcast, some in shock, others in hope. Amidst the chaos, Jack, Thomas, and Anna stood united on stage, symbols of a new era for Innovatech, an era of transparency, accountability, and true progress. The sun was setting over the city, bathing the Innovatech building in a golden glow. And as night fell, a new light of hope began to shine for the company and all who were part of it.